think when people hear the words storytelling, they're thinking of books, they're thinking of movies, but the truth is each one of us is not only living our own story, but each one of us should feel compelled to share our story with another person, because only when you do that do you connect with another person. When we're sitting in the theater watching a movie or we're reading a book, the only way that the message of that book, the message, the theme, as I'm calling it, is going to impact us is if we can relate to the protagonist, to the main character. If you want to connect with anyone in any way, in relationships, you have to make a space in yourself for another person and allow them to connect with you. And the only way to do that is to be vulnerable.
If you've ever heard of Disney, if you've ever heard of Tinkerbell and Netflix and DreamWorks, well, then you are watching and listening to the work, to the genius of our guest, Saul Blinkoff. Thank you so much, Saul, for coming on today. I'm so excited for this interview.
Wow, Patty, thank you so much for that introduction. And, you know, you mentioned those companies that I've been fortunate enough to work with. And I just, even hearing you say them, in my brain, it goes, wow, did I really work there? Do I really get to live my dream job? Like, I can't believe it. Thank you for highlighting those. And yeah, it's just a thrill to be here with you and your audience. So thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You know, maybe you came in the back door, but you still got in. Right?
There you go. That's right. That's right. Still made it to the table. Right.
So I actually would like to start our conversation talking about storytelling, because from what I understand, you are, rumor has it, the world's premier storyteller. Today, we all talk about storytelling, but years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, nobody knew what that meant. So pray tell.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm definitely not the world's premier anything other than a dad to 4 kids and a husband to my wife. That's right. But look,
I have
storytelling
4 kids too. So
I have
4 kids. Too.
And I have a puppy. You got a dog there too?
We did, but the dog passed away. So
okay,
yes,
great.
We've always had puppies.
You've always had puppies. So
yeah.
Look, storytelling.
I saw the puppy behiund you. I only saw the
yeah, he walks around, right? So here's
he owns the place, right?
Like he does, and he does actually. So look, storytelling, I think when people hear the words storytelling, they're thinking of books, they're thinking of movies, but the truth is, you know, the truth is each one of us is not only living our own story, but each one of us should feel compelled to share our story with another person, because only when you do that do you connect with another person. I'll just give you an example. You know, when you watch a movie, read a book, you know, in order for that movie, the impact of that movie to work with us, you know, look, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a director. Let's say I make a film, and let's talk about Shawshank Redemption. You've seen that movie, right? Shawshank Redemption. So
I'm glad you picked that one. I've seen. I'm not
okay.
Really
there you go. Right. But the theme of that movie, there's a message that Frank Darabont, the director, standing on the shoulders of Stephen King's short story, there's a message that he wanted to share with the world. Here's the message: get busy living or get busy dying. What he's telling us through that movie is life is a choice, and each one of us has the choice to choose life. You could feel every day like your life is in a prison. I can't move. I have no hope. Or you could feel like everyday life is the potential to grow. You can be in a prison, but in your mind, you could be free. Or you could be out in the world free, and in your mind, you could be in prison. But as a director, you don't stand in front of an audience of hundreds of people and say the words, here, I have a message for you. Life is a choice. Get busy living or get busy dying. Instead, as filmmakers, as storytellers, what we do is we say to our audiences, especially in the cinematic world, I want you to shut off your phone. I want you to sit in this black room with the lights out. You're going to watch this glowing screen for 2 minutes, for 2 hours. You're going to watch this glowing screen for 2 hours. You're going to cry when I manipulate you to cry. You're going to laugh when I manipulate you to laugh. And you will not walk out of here knowing a theme. You will walk out of here experiencing a message, feeling it. That's the magic of storytelling. And here comes the other part I want to share. When we're sitting in the theater watching a movie, or we're reading a book. The only way that the message of that book, the theme, as I'm calling it, is going to impact us is if we can relate to the protagonist, to the main character. And the only way to relate to a main character is I need to be able to relate to them. I need to be able to see myself in them. So if you're listening right now and you're like, well, I don't make my career as a storyteller. I'm not an author. I'm not a filmmaker. Well, hold on a second. If you want to connect with anyone in any way in relationships, you have to make a space in yourself for another person and allow them to connect with you. And the only way to do that is to be vulnerable. Let them see the real deal. The best main characters in any stories are flawed, right? They're all flawed. They're not super. Superman isn't the most successful comic character of all time. He was too perfect. Spider-Man, much more successful. He's flawed. He has acne. He has challenges. If someone's going to connect with us, we have to be vulnerable. And which, by the way, that intimacy is really an extension of vulnerability. That's what intimacy is. All intimacy is I feel comfortable to be vulnerable with you. That's the message.
Today's podcast episode, because Saul just touched on every single theme I wanted to discuss. So let's see if we can unravel that. So you talked about vulnerability and intimacy, 1,000%. You talked about giving a message. We all, as a relationship expert, as someone that works with trust, coaching and consulting with people, right? In business.
Yeah.
Without trust, we can't have a connection.
Hearing.
And we cannot create trust without being vulnerable, right? So people like the flawed character because they can relate to them, because we all know we're not perfect, no matter what facade we might put.
We may not admit it, but you're right. We know it, right? We may not admit to others we're not perfect. We like the facade. On Facebook, I show my perfect self, but deep down, of course, we know we're flawed.
Oh, well, you got the highlights, right? On Facebook, sure. Right.
That's right.
I call a farce book, right? This is my I could tell you stories about that. Like, people put up, oh, this is my beautiful husband. We're married so many years. I'm like, I know for a fact you hate his guts. Whatever. Like, I know for a fact you hate his guts. But when you talk about,
oh, that was great. When you said that, I immediately went to, and I'm going to date myself here. I went to All in the Family and imagining like what Archie Bunker's Facebook would have looked like. Hated, I just imagine his Facebook. Oh, they're such a lovely little old couple, or like the Costanzas in Seinfeld,
I think people loved All in the Family, which I guess you couldn't make today, but we are not going to go there,
right?
Because he was so vulnerable. He was so flawed. He was so flawed.
You knew who he was. You knew who he was, right? You knew who he was. Yeah.
Right. All right. So let's go back to making the connection. Let's go back to the relationships, because you're right. And I actually just went into the city, and I'm from New York. So when I say the city, I just assume people I know that I mean New York City in spite of LA. So we went into the city and we just saw it come from away. Right. And it was all, and as a native New Yorker, we feel like the rest of the country hasn't completely gotten 9/11 all these years.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, sure is.
But what they did was they were able to create a connection with the audience, right? And you leave there feeling so moved. And you talked about a choice. So as soon as you went to the choice, I went right to Man's Search for Meaning, right? Who survived the concentration camps? The people that made a choice to live.
Yeah.
And they had a reason greater than themselves. So Viktor Frankl, when he survived and they went on to become a psychiatrist, I'm sure you're familiar with the book.
Oh, yeah.
And he wanted to know who survived, right? And it wasn't the strongest, the smartest. It was someone that had a reason. They had a why. So I'll never forget this part. He talks about there was a set of twin girls, and he asked each of them separately, how did you survive this deprivation, the worst of humanity? And both of them separately said, I had to live because I knew if I died, it would have killed my sister.
Mm. Yeah. Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So the relationship was tantamount to life. And to your point, it's exactly right. If you're not living, if you're not learning, you're dying.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. As a filmmaker who knows how to touch the hearts of their audience, why on God's green earth does it feel as if everybody, society, communities are making such poor choices. What is going on?
Wow. So, this is not the average podcast. This is not, I love
I told you that.
You did. And this is one of the just most
You
beautiful.
okay?
Oh, I love it. It's one of the most beautiful questions I've ever been asked.
Okay.
It's wonderful. Let's go back for a minute to the two girls. Okay. The two girls in the camps during the Holocaust. And when they were asked, the one was asked, why? How did you keep going? She said, because I knew what was at stake was the life of another human being.
Yeah, goosebumps.
Right.
You said it so much better than me.
Well, and the title of the book was Man's Search for Meaning. I just want to highlight that for a moment. If you ask 99% of the world, what is your goal in life? I think without blinking an eye, most people would say, I know what I want. I want to be happy. Everybody wants to be happy. As a matter of fact, that's what we say to each other on New Year's Eve. I'm giving you a blessing. To celebrate life, I have a blessing for you. I want you to have a year of happiness. And how do we think we're going to be happy? When I get this, my soulmate, my career, the bank account, the new house, whatever it is. Usually for most people,
External.
happiness exactly is dependent on outside experiences. But truthfully, happiness is a mindset. Happiness is a choice. And one of the messages that I try to remind myself daily, and my kids and people that I speak to, is don't go for a life of happiness. Don't go for a life of that. There's something actually sweeter, and that's a life of meaning. And the only way to accomplish a meaningful life is to say, how can I serve another person? How can I impact another person? Because ultimately, what makes you happy may not be what's good for you. Think about that for a moment. All the things that when I was a kid, you know what I wanted? I wanted candy bars. I was 11 years old. And I said, someday I'm going to have a job. I'm going to make money. I'm going to fill drawers of candy bars. I can tell you this. Look, I work in Hollywood and I spent my career as a Disney animator and director. When I was in college trying to get into Disney, and I got...
Where'd you go to school? Where'd you go to school?
I went to school in Columbus, Ohio at the Columbus College of Art and Design.
Okay. Because I thought it was Columbia. And I'm like, this guy did not go to... You just don't seem like a Columbia stick up.
Right.
In the mud.
Right. Not Columbia. Yeah. Columbus, Ohio, great community. And I'm in school. And after my second trying to get into Disney, I got rejected again. It was incredibly competitive. I mean, they picked about 15 or 17 students a year out of over 4,000 portfolios a year. I mean, the odds are whoever's trying, you're not going to get in.
So this is for animation.
Animation. Yeah. And there was no Pixar then. There was no DreamWorks then. If you wanted a job in animation, it was Disney, right? That was the best. And I will never forget one day, my sister, I have a twin sister, Rena, and she calls me.
My oldest are twin boys, by the way.
Is that right? There you go. We're so connected. And my sister says, how's it going? I feel so bad. You didn't make it. You didn't get in. And I was so down on myself, Patty. And I remember saying to my sister one thing. I said, Rena, if I could get into Disney, if I could sit at that desk and draw the same picture of Mickey Mouse every single day, the rest of my life, I would be happy. That's what I needed to be happy. But I'm telling you, Patty, if I could go back in a time machine now to myself at that age, you know what I would tell myself? Saul, grow up. Grow up. You think life is about how can I approach every day to get what's going to make me happy? Think about children. If you're a parent listening right now, when our kids are young, they wake up every day and they have that feeling of, I want to get this. I want to get that.
I want.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's it. I mean, the most selfish human beings in the world are babies, right? Right. Because they're learning.
That's age appropriate. It's the problem. The problem is when the adults are acting.
That's the problem. But when we become teenagers, that's the part where every day, hopefully through nurturing, parenting, teachers, our environment, we've learned that meaning comes from not waking up every day going, what can I get? But it's what can I give? As a matter of fact, my wife and I have a quote, Patty, that we love. It's a Winston Churchill quote. He's got the best quotes.
What an interesting guy, right?
What a guy, right? And this is what he said. He said, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I really subscribe to is this. In order to have a life of meaning, I'm not saying work hard at something so you can impact another person, and you will. You may not make the biggest impact, but if you're striving for that, you will have a meaningful life, and you will, I have a podcast, as you know, called Life of Awesome. I'm going to do a shameless plug for my podcast right now.
I'm sorry. I should.
No, it's okay. So
Okay.
Life of Awesome is the podcast, and I bring on an interview with George Foreman, the boxer, right? Some people know him as the grill.
I was going to say the grill.
The grill guy, right? So you have to hear this. This is crazy. This is a crazy thing. So, you're a podcast host. So, you do your research before you bring the guest on, right? So I know George, and yeah, he won an Olympic gold medal for boxing. And then he became heavyweight champion of the world. And then 20 years later, came out of retirement, became the oldest to achieve that accolade again. Yeah. Heavyweight champion of the world.
I remember that. That was a big deal.
That was a big deal, right? Because he was old, he was overweight. People made fun of him. No one thought he could do it. And boy, did he get the last laugh, didn't he? He did it. Anyway, he made $138 million his first year on the Foreman Grill. The guy is successful, so successful. I would have him on my podcast just because he's an Olympian from the Olympics, gold medal. That's enough of a reason. I'd have him on just being the heavyweight boxer. I'd have him on just being an entrepreneur in business.
Now I know why I haven't been invited on.
So I bring him on and I list all of his accolades in the intro. And I go, George, you're this, you're that, you're a father, grandfather, great grandfather. The first things out of his mouth after I list all this is, Saul, the thing I'm most proud of on that list is great grandfather. Wait a minute. The thing you're most proud of, you're George Foreman. You're famous for money, boxing, grills, and all this stuff. And great grandfather, that's what you're most proud of. And then he says right out of his mouth, he's over 70 years old, by the way. The first thing he says after that is, Saul, I feel like the best is yet to come. I haven't even gotten started yet.
Love it.
And I'm like, wow, look, you brought me on, right, Patty? You said in the intro, Saul, you work here and there and all that. I'm like, yeah, look, I've done a lot. Pat myself on the back. George Foreman has achieved so much more. He's like, hey, I haven't done anything. I'm just getting going. And I'm like, wow, what am I doing? But you have to hear this. This is crazy. At the end of the interview, I get to the end and I ask him, George, what's your legacy? What's the legacy you want your kids to remember? What's the legacy you want the world to remember about you? Without batting an eye, he says, Saul, I want people to remember that I loved human beings, that I loved humanity, that when I walked down the street and I saw somebody and I would smile at them, it could make an impact in their day. So I interview him. I edit the episode. I'm about to publish it. I made myself a bagel. I go to the toaster with a schmear of cream cheese and whitefish salad, right? Because I'm from New York, right? We know whitefish salad. I make my bagel, and I had on the YouTube, on the computer, playing the fight from the night he was 20 years old and he became heavyweight champion of the world against Smokin' Joe Frazier. Mm-hmm. And it's playing in the background. I've already finished the episode. I haven't published it yet. As I'm listening, the fight goes to the end and I discover gold. I discover something so unbelievable. I literally spit out my bagel. I'm like, what did I just see? Think about this moment, Patty. He becomes heavyweight champion of the world. In that moment, he's 20 years old. In that moment, he went from being poverty-stricken to a gajillionaire. In that moment, he beat Smokin' Joe Frazier, his idol. What that must have felt like emotionally. The first things that must have been circulating in his mind is like, holy cow, I'm changing my life. Look what I've done. Look what I can now do with this money. His life changed in 2 minutes after. Some sports announcer comes up to him and George Storr is standing in the ring and all these people are around him. And he comes up to him and puts a microphone in his face. And he says, George, now that you've become heavyweight champion of the world, what's next for you? And without batting an eye, George says, I want to go tell all the kids out there that you can achieve your dream. The first thing he's thinking, not the second. I thought you were going to say
Disney. I'm going to Disney.
Yeah, I know, right? I know. The first thing out of his mouth isn't, you know what? Yeah, thank you. I did it. I worked hard.
I'm going to buy a Lamborghini.
And tomorrow on the talk show, he'll tell you he's going to make it. No, the first thing that he's feeling, the emotions are, I want to use this position I'm in to impact another human being. I want to tell the kids out there that you can achieve anything. And when he says that, the sports announcer doesn't like the answer. He's like, no, George. No, I don't mean that. I mean in the ring. Like, what's next for you in the ring? And George says, the world is my ring. The world is my ring. Wow. And he says, and I'm going to deliver this message every day of my life. At 20 years old, he had clarity
Wisdom. Yeah.
on what's important in life. Don't wake up every day and think, what can I get? Because if you do, you will always be beholden to feeling something based on outside experiences. Wake up every day and say, how can I contribute to humanity? How can I make a life by giving to another human being? That's
Okay,
a life
so
of meaning.
let me jump in here. That's incredible.
And by the way, Patty, that's what we saw in the two sisters. What gave her that life is, you know what? I got to take care of her, not me. It's when we put our focus not on us, but we put on another person. That is energizing and motivating to grow and to live.
Well, I didn't know this about George Foreman, and I have to listen to that podcast, but I like him so much more now. It reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen there's been a lot of press, or I've noticed a lot of press on, there's I think an African, I could be wrong, please forgive me, but a soccer player who is one of the best soccer players in the world. And I love sports, but I'm not a soccer fan. And apparently, because I'm not European, right? But I'm an American. What do I know? And he apparently is like one of the best in the world. I'm sure some of the listeners know who it is. And he walks through the street like you wouldn't know who he was. And they said to him, in soccer in Africa, they take their soccer very, like, people die when you lose. Like, they take it very seriously.
Right.
And I guess he has a ton of money, and he just walks like a regular person, carries his bag. And people said, don't you want a yacht? He goes, I don't need anything. He said, I need the people from my village to be able to eat and to be able to live and to be educated. I am embarrassed. I don't remember the man's name.
Isn't that incredible?
It is. And we would do well to take a page from his book.
Yeah.
For sure.
For sure.
But I think.
Beautiful.
I think to bring it full circle, though, Saul, I feel somewhere along the way, if you talk to people that grew up during World War II, okay, and I'm not saying that was, at post World War II was the be all and end all, but people just came back from a horrific, right? Back to the Holocaust, horrific World War, horrific.
Yeah.
People lied about their age to be able to fight, to save the world from fascism, right? And there was so much about giving and a greater cause than yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel that the greatest generation, one of the reasons for that is because there was a sense of service. I know I grew up, we had nothing, but my parents, my father, when he was still alive, they did so much volunteering. They were always giving. Everybody's kid was in our little, flat, a railroad flat in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And we didn't have anything, right? It was before reality TV. We didn't want for anything, but we learned how to serve. We learned that this is the way you do things.
Right. That's not happening now.
My point to you is, how did we lose that? Like, it's all about me, but how did we, and it's not just us, like, it seems as if the world is about me. Is it?
Yeah.
So
well, look, I think. Here's my take. I mean, first of all,
because we need people like you to bring it back.
Well, I'm making my effort in my small way. I think we need people like everyone to bring it back. I'll say a couple of things on that. First of all, I firmly believe that those values, because what you're talking about, when someone says, oh, someone has certain values, what are their values? I tell people when they're dating, make sure you find out what their values are. So what are their values? Well, what is it that they value?
Mm-hmm.
What do they value? Where do they spend their money? Where do they spend their time? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what do they value? And, I firmly believe that the values that build a person, the values that someone embraces, comes from their parents. It comes from their home life. Is it instilled from the beginning? That's number one. But let me take it a step further, because you're asking the good question. Well, what happened along the way? Because you have parents out there listening right now who do have values on giving. And they do, but maybe their kids aren't giving it the way they did. Maybe we are losing it a generation. And here's where I think that's happening. It's happening because with the advent of the growth of technology, which is huge in the last 10 years.
Revolutionary, literally
Revolutionary. Like every year, it's like, whatever 50 years of technology growth is, we get that in 5 months now, right? So with the advent of the technology, the facts are the technology allows us to accomplish our goals, whatever they are, with much less resistance. That's a fact. Everything's easier now. Shopping on Amazon, that's a game changer for my lifestyle. I can buy socks. I can buy whatever. Think of all the hours we've spent. If you remember pre-Amazon people, right? We're dating ourselves.
Right.
How you had to shop. You had to go to one store, then another store to find it.
I have to joke, Saul. I have to tease you. Years ago, my kids were still home, right? I used to joke and open up my computer on my kitchen table and say, okay, I'm going to go shopping. I gotta get my coat. Let me get ready. Log on.
I love it. Right. So like, with the advent of this technology, the facts are, these are facts now. This is not my point. The reality is we can have what we want quicker, faster, and have much more opportunity for it, right? You can have food from your favorite restaurant delivered. You can stay in bed with an iPhone and not have to move. By the way, I was going to say you could work. It used to be when I was starting out at Disney, I worked 9 to 5, at least in the beginning, until we got to overtime when I was an animator on the film Mulan. And that was like 14-hour days, another story. But at the end of the day, when you left the office,
you were done.
Nobody could get you. You didn't have email. No one had email.
I just had this conversation about someone.
You had a work phone. And
you got on the train and you were done.
You're done. You come in the next day and you see that little red light on your phone. Oh, I have a message, or someone get you, whatever. Even before that, there was no message but like you were done. But today, if you're the kind of parent that's like, or a husband or wife, you're like, I'm going to come home and I'm going to separate work from home. And I'm going to set up a fence. I'm not going to go into my technology when I get home. I'm going to be with my kids. I'm going to be with my spouse. Guess what? You're going to get fired because everyone else in your group is accessible 24/7.
Well, I do think COVID changed that. COVID has changed that, but I get your point.
No, you can work from home. But what I'm saying is people have expectations that you're going to read their texts and emails all night long, 24/7. And by the way, look, I'm Jewish and observant, so my family we observe.
I saw that. I saw you were hanging out. Not even modern Orthodox, like more Orthodox.
Right, yeah, old school, right? So we keep
Baruch
Shabbat,
Hashem.
right? There you go, Baruch Hashem. So we keep Shabbat, and for anyone listening, Jewish or not Jewish, the Sabbath for us is an opportunity to shut off our phones, shut off our technology, unplug, disconnect in order to connect with what's real. And Jewish or not, I think the greatest prescription you could offer any human being today is set up a fence for your time and shut off those devices for 1 day a week. Guess what? Right. If you're a doctor and it's life and death, I get that's a different thing. But the boundaries, and let me tell you, I come home on a Tuesday night from work, from DreamWorks, great, fun, cool job. It's still work. It's still hard. It's still a job. I come home on a Tuesday night. I'm sitting at the dinner table and I get that phone call from work. Bing, I got to go. Guys, because daddy's got work. Or we're in the car and I get a call from one of my producers or something. Like, guys, quiet. Daddy's on a call. You know what my kids know from that? They know, like, okay, we're important. But when work call comes in, we take a back seat.
Yeah.
But guess what? Friday night, I shut off my iPhone, my iPad, my iMac. My wife makes a beautiful dinner. We sit as a family. No devices at the table. It's the Sabbath, whether you're doing Sabbath or not. Like, keep your devices away
at the table. Yeah.
And guess what we do? Get ready, everyone. You ready for this? Get ready. This is revolutionary. We talk to each other. Can you imagine that?
Conversation.
Right. We talk to each other. And guess what? Your teenagers who are listening right now, if you're listening, your teenagers, guess what? They'll get used to it. If you're paying their phone bill, they don't have the right to say they have the phone all the time. You tell them these are the fences for this family. This is how we do. Or if you're going out to eat, leave your phone at home. I don't mean silence it. Actually, leave it at home. So answering what you're saying, what's changing is, yes, technology is forcing us to live in a world where we have what we want sooner and quicker. We all know that's real. But the byproduct of that's going to be that we're going to lose something if we allow it to happen. We're going to lose the ability to connect and to value our time. So we have to set up parameters and fences to protect that, or we're going to be in trouble. We're going to be in real trouble. Look, we are in trouble. We live in a time
and there's
where
no delayed gratification.
There's none. And how often does someone tell you, Patty, this happens to me all the time. Someone will call me or email me and they'll say, oh, there's a new show on Netflix you got to watch. You ever hear that phrase?
Sure.
Someone calls you, oh, you got to watch Breaking Bad. You haven't seen Breaking Bad. Oh, you got to see Breaking Bad. Oh, you got to watch Homeland. You haven't seen Homeland? Dude, you got to watch Homeland. Right. Are you crazy? You haven't seen Homeland? You got to watch it. So the person's like, oh my gosh, I got to go home. I got to binge that show. Guess what? Just because there's a great show out there doesn't mean you need to watch it. Who said the goal of life is to watch every great show? Right now, there is one show out there I will say that everyone should watch. Okay. It's one of the most emotional shows, incredible shows
I hope
ever.
It's one of yours.
And it's not one of mine. But when you watch this show,
humble guy.
I promise you, when you watch this show, I promise you, you will shut off the episodes and you will grow as a human being. Just watching it, you will be a better father, a better mother, a better son, daughter, parent.
I think you're falling. You should be a marketer. I mean, how come we not watch it now?
I'm just telling you how I see it. And the show is called, here we go. Can I get a drum roll, Patty? The show is called This Is Us. Have you seen it?
No, but everybody tells
There you go. See, everybody tells you.
Everybody
watch this.
Patty,
you haven't seen This Is Us. You haven't watched it. You're still breathing. I don't get that. But seriously, it's an incredible show. I'm not going to spoil anything.
Why? What is it? What is it about the show?
Here's what it is.
Everything. There is so much out there. You are giving this your seal of approval.
Here's what it is. That show shines a light on all the emotions that we will feel throughout our lives. I'll tell you what I mean. So if you're listening to this, they did that in books, right? But this one, it highlights it I've never seen anything like this, not even come close to the emotions that this delves into. But let me explain what I mean. So imagine you have that feeling of young love, right? The butterflies, right? Remember that?
Yeah.
It's great, right? That's a positive emotional experience. But what about 6 months later when you get your heart broken?
Right.
That's one of the lowest lows. So this show will highlight both of those moments, but really let them breathe. I'll give you another example from the show specifically. I'm a dad with 4 kids. You have a bunch of kids, right? What do you have? 4. We said that, right? So you remember when you put that first kid in the car seat?
They were identical twins. Yes.
There was still one of them you put in first. I won't tell the other one who that was, but we know that one of them you wanted safe before the other. But
it was all a blur, quite frankly.
It was all a blur. Good.
Yeah.
Nice cover. Nice. So, but you remember you remember when you held your kid the first time in that moment? Well, this will highlight that feeling for such a long time that it'll bring you back to those moments in your life, the highs and the lows of life. And what I love about it is no matter where you are in life, you will see yourself in one of those characters. I said earlier, we talked about storytelling, that you need to be able to relate to a protagonist. You just see yourself. Let's talk about a Disney movie for a moment. Did you ever see the movie The Incredibles? Remember that movie? No?
I remember, but
okay, so you're the one that didn't see it. I heard there was one. Okay, so
but to be fair, I didn't see the whole Godfather either, but I read the book.
Okay, you've seen The Lion King, right? Let's just
I saw
settle that
twice. Am I redeemed?
But have you seen the movie?
Yes, of course, with my children. Of
All
course.
right, you paused. I saw you pause there for a moment.
With the old VHSs.
VHS, yeah. Remember those days? Yeah. Right. My kids can't even relate. We used to have to get up to change the channel, and you watched what was on TV. Nala, yeah. What a great movie. But look, here's
I didn't want you to think I was lying. See,
no, I appreciate it. I know.
Okay.
I got you. Oh, you know your stuff, right? So, no, right. Pennsylvania, as we sing in our house. So look, in The Incredibles, it's a movie about superheroes.
Right.
And there's a scene in that movie where there's a father who comes home from work. He's had a really tough day, and mom is home and she's had a really tough day with the kids. And the teenage boy is like having a tough time, or the teenage girl is having a tough time with kids, and the little boy. And if you hit pause right there, everybody watching that movie can relate to what somebody on the screen is going through, right? That's what I mean before it has to be relatable. So this show is very relatable. And I promise people that it's a little heavy. And where I know most people will say, I want to watch something that's going to make me escape from life and give me a break. Go watch Seinfeld again. That's what I do when I want to laugh. But,
yada, yada.
But, yada, 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 right? But when you want to grow and you want to feel empowered to grow and become a better version of yourself, make sure you access content that's going to uplift you and make you feel more alive. Like going back to Shawshank, get busy living or get busy dying. You could watch some shows that are fun and entertaining, but you're dying inside. You don't need to watch it.
All right. So
find things that's going to help you grow. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to push back just a little bit.
I like that. Good.
Okay.
Bring it on.
So TV, streaming, all this stuff, it is awesome. Having said that, I don't think it's the same as reading. And I feel like we're losing something by
Well, because reading allows you to
create
use your imagination. Own. Yeah.
Right. So what do you say to that?
I say better to read than to watch a movie.
Do you? Okay.
I mean, I'll tell you, for our kids, like when Harry Potter was huge, right? So our kids, we said, if you want to watch the movie, you got to earn it by reading the book
first. Yeah.
Right now, here over the pandemic,
it also taught them that the books are almost always better than the movie.
Oh, that's for sure.
I'm not just saying to say that. I don't want to be insulting.
For sure. Yeah. Oh, for sure. My daughter just finished, I think it was Pride and Prejudice, my 17-year-old. Mm-hmm. Boy, did she love that. And then now she can watch the movie, right? Classic. But over the pandemic, we sat with our kids, and I read for them a chapter every week of A Tale of Two Cities. It's my favorite story. Just incredible character.
It's the worst of times, right?
Right? Isn't that incredible? Yep. What an amazing story by Charles Dickens, right? And let me tell you, by reading that out loud, I didn't just read and they listened. No, we would talk together as a family throughout all of it, this character and what was the culture like and how do we learn about history from this and how do we see ourselves in it was such a bonding experience. My son just said to me yesterday, he's like, Dad, I want to read it again together. I want to do it again. I'm like, wow, like it took us a year. Literally a year. Then we watched the movie, which is an incredible movie, but
not the same.
I totally subscribe to what you're saying. In most cases, yeah, the books are going to do that. Now, let's go a step further, though. There are certain movies where if a filmmaker is an expert at camera, lenses, the right actors, the music, look at a movie like Schindler's List. Mm-hmm. Look at the emotion of those sequences. You could read about the Holocaust and it'll be intellectual, and it'll be emotional. But when you see a great storyteller, marry music,
get away from the mother.
It's incredible, right? The emotion. There's a scene in that movie, I'm sure you remember, where someone is watching. I think it's Oskar Schindler. He's watching all the Jews being basically
herded,
or deported out of their communities.
Right.
And there's this little girl with a red dress. Do you remember this girl?
Yes.
And everything's in black and white. And you see this whole town. Everyone's bustling and people are being shot. It's this one scene. You can actually go to YouTube, people, and type in Schindler's List girl with a red dress and watch this scene. People are being shot. Kids are being ripped out of their parents' arms. Husbands and wives are being pulled apart. Fire, broken glass. It's terrible. And Spielberg's like, I know you see all this, and that's the backdrop, but I want you to focus on this one little girl. You don't know her name. You don't know who she's. She's alone and she's scared. And when that music comes on, written by John Williams, that incredible, haunting, deep, emotional theme with those minor chords, when you see that, then you're experiencing, like I said earlier, experiencing the emotions of a story in just such a deep level. So I think there's a place for both. There has to be a place for both, or I won't have a job.
There you go. So there you go. But hang on a second. Let's go back. Let's go back. So as an eternal optimist, as I would imagine, for some reason, I feel you are as well. So we've lost it. So let me just encapsulate a little bit about what you described from the world that I work in, which is, let's talk about communication. Let's talk about connection. Let's talk about relating. All of that falls under the umbrella of being empathic, right? Having empathy for the other person, caring about the other person, feeling a sense of responsibility for someone other than yourself.
Beautiful, beautiful.
When we serve, when we volunteer, the world smiles. How about we say it that way?
Yeah.
How do we get that back? Because I think a lot of what's lost in terms of we're not connected, we're not relating, we're plugged in, we are not actively present, We are only half present. We're not fully engaged. So when you're hurt, when you're upset, if nobody cares about that from the This Is Us perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I heard you correctly.
Yeah.
If nobody can relate to that, well, then guess what? Then I learn I'm all for me.
Right.
Nobody else cares.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how can we get that back?
There's
Because I
only-
do believe we
yeah.
can get that back. So
I do.
how?
I think there's only one way to get it back. And I'm going to illustrate it the best way I know how, which is I'm going to bring in 2 movie references for you to make this point. Okay. Have you seen the movie E.T.? Do you remember that one? E.T. Phone Home, right? So in that movie, if everyone remembers
I
the
saw
movie,
it at Disney. I went on the ride. Like,
right?
yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, right. So actually it's Universal. You saw it at Universal Studios. Yeah. That's okay. I just had to correct because some people listening like, hey, wait a minute.
Foot out of my mouth. Classic me. Whatever.
That's okay. That's okay. So check this out. In the movie E.T., which is, by the way, Steven Spielberg's mother, his late mother, who just died just a handful of years ago, had a restaurant around the block from where we live. He bought it for her as a gift in LA in the 80s. It was a dairy restaurant, and she was in there every day, except for the Sabbath, right? Mm-hmm. It was a kosher dairy restaurant called the Milky Way. And it had Spielberg.
On Saturday, you know that something's fishy.
Yeah, exactly, right? And there's Spielberg posters on the walls and everything. And what was so wonderful and charming about this place is as you would go eat there, she would walk around and sit with you at your table. Bounce around every day.
Old school,
right? I mean, every day. My kids grew up thinking that she was like their third grandmother. I mean, she was always interested, Bubby, right? She was interested in them. So one time she was sitting next to me and I asked her this question. What's your favorite Spielberg movie? That's what I asked his mother, right? Because I know my favorite Spielberg movie is Jaws. I'm like, what's your favorite Spielberg movie? She goes, my favorite Spielberg movie is E.T. I'm like, why? Now, she could have said Schindler, which won him an Oscar, and Color Purple, and all Close Encounters. She goes, because E.T. was the most real to who my son really is, because he grew up with parents who were divorced, and he grew up that middle child syndrome, and he grew up with an imagination, and that one is really his working through the trauma of childhood and coming to terms as an adult, understanding who he is. And that's a beautiful answer from a mother, right? So if you look at the movie E.T., in the very beginning of the movie, they're sitting around the table. Elliot's sitting there. He's a teenager. You know, he's like 11 with his older brother, little sister, Drew Barrymore, and mom. Dad ran off with some other girl. And Elliot says something that's not so sensitive to mom. He brings up the fact that dad left with Sally to Mexico. And mom breaks down in tears. And Elliot's older brother says to Elliot, when are you going to start thinking about how other people feel for a change? That's the message of the entire movie. You may remember the movie, Patty, as, oh, this is this boy and this alien and he has to send him home. But the depth of the movie, like I said earlier, there's a message. The message of that movie is, when are we going to wake up and empathize with another person? And only when E.T. comes into Elliot's life does Elliot now start to feel for another being. And there's a great moment where the scientists at the end of the movie, they're sitting with the brother and they're trying to understand, because Elliot and E.T. they're being hooked up to these monitors and E.T. is kind of dying. And the scientist asks the older brother, he's like, so let me get this straight. So Elliot thinks E.T.'s thoughts, and his brother goes, no, Elliot feels what E.T. feels. He feels his feelings. The only way to empathize with another human being is not to try to understand what they're going through, but to try to feel what they're going through. And you asked the question, how do we become more empathetic to our fellow man, right? To other human beings, there's only one way. And you actually touched on it with one word. It's the word responsibility. That's the way. You know, Lion King, the movie you've seen, I know you've seen that one. If you look at Lion King, in the beginning of the movie, Simba just wants to be king. He sings the song. You remember the song, I just can't wait.
I just want to be king.
Right. Just can't wait to be king. Remember? He sings that song. He's young and he thinks being a king is he can do whatever he wants.
He thinks it's all that. Wait.
He thinks it's all that. And his dad actually says to him, right? Mufasa says, Simba, there's more to being a king than getting your way all the time. Simba's like, there's more? What could be better than that? Right? Then something happens to dad. What happens to dad, Patty? You remember?
That Simba kills him.
Well, Simba causes him to die, basically.
Not Simba. The
Scar.
Scar kills him.
Right.
He sets him up and kills him.
Right. So Mufasa dies.
Am I passing? Am I right?
You're right. And by the way, this is spoiler alert for everybody. I know we just ruined the movie for if you haven't seen it, but guess what? If you haven't seen it by now, 30 years later,
oh my God,
crawl out of a rock. That's for sure. Right. Crawl out of a rock. So, right, Mufasa dies. And by the way, it's a Disney movie, so they're always going to kill a parent, right? Bambi, we know what happened to his mother. By the way, Patty, did you ever notice how many Disney characters don't even have mothers, right? Little Mermaid.
Yes.
Little Mermaid has no mother. Orphans. Aladdin has no mother, right? Ariel, right? Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Belle and Beauty and the Beast has no mother, right? What is it with Disney and mothers? I know. That's another podcast. We'll do that. So watch this.
Because I think whom I've been, I was having a conversation with a group of people and I was saying how Bambi is actually quite traumatic.
Oh, it is traumatic.
Died in the fire. Like we let kids watch that. Oh, back before we used to hover over there.
Well, you have to be careful what you let your kid. And people tell me all the time, like, well, my kid shouldn't watch this. I'm like, who said your kid should be watching Lion King at 5 years old? They shouldn't. Wait till they're like 11 where they can start to, because Lion King is a great chance for them to learn about the circle of life. And guess what? Life has death in it. I remember my mom telling me, one of the most important people in my mother's life was her grandmother. This was a woman.
Her grandmother?
Her grandmother who came from Europe. She had 10 children and she was blind for at least the last son, which was my grandfather. She became blind later in her life.
Glaucoma?
And I don't know what happened, but she became blind and she was very, very close to my mother. My mother was very close. To this day, she says she thinks of her every day and that relationship. And when my mother's grandmother died, actually no, it was her husband. When my mother's grandfather died, which is years earlier, she was a little girl, and my grandfather wouldn't let my mother go to the funeral of her grandfather because she was I think 11 years old or 12 years old, maybe even a little older. I think she was like 15. And my mom always said she lost that closure. Mm-hmm. Like her parents tried to shield her from death.
That was the thinking at the time.
That was the thinking at the time. Didn't understand, but it would have been so cathartic for her to be able to experience that grief as a 15-year-old, for that closure. But when parents say to me, oh, I don't want to show my kids Lion King because daddy dies, I'm like, well, you don't show it to them at the wrong age, but at the right age. It's a wonderful tool, as stories are, to teach us messages. But let's go back to Lion King for 1 second.
Let me tell you one thing about Lion King.
Yeah.
That the first time I ever went to a preview of a show was Lion King in New York City. I was a member of the Disney Club and something came in the mail.
Wow.
And I called up my siblings. I'm one of 5 and I bought like 30 tickets.
Wow.
And we all, and the excitement in the theater was incredible, right? It was the first time, was it Julie Timon with the masks or
Julie Taymor? Yeah.
Right. With the whole,
oh, the costumes.
And my point was, it was so emotional. And my father died when we were very young. My brothers pretty much grew up without a father. And when Mufasa dies, and there's that scene of him talking above something.
Right.
First time I ever saw my brother cry.
Wow.
And my brother's a pretty successful guy on Wall Street today, and he would die if he knew I was saying this.
Isn't that incredible?
But
it got him. Wow. Yeah. Isn't that something? That movie.
The point is, it touches you.
Well, Walt Disney, when he created even Snow White, people couldn't believe when they were watching the screen that people were crying. These are drawings. How are they crying? It's that same magic. It's that when you relate to something, it becomes real. Your brother, when he got teary-eyed in Lion King, he knew it wasn't real, but the feelings were real, right? So going back to Lion King,
resonation, that's the empathy.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. But I want to share with you what I think is the greatest tool to become an empathetic human being. And here's what it is. Let's look at Lion King again. Simba wants to be king. He thinks it's the greatest thing in the world. Mufasa dies. Simba goes off and lives in Hakuna Matata world. You remember that? You
Yeah.
remember the song?
Yeah.
Hakuna Matata. Right? So, and
I shouldn't be singing. Like it's really
no, it's good. You got it. And he goes to Hakuna Matata world.
what a
Hakuna Matata world
wonderful phrase.
right?
Yeah.
And it's filled with waterfalls and it's lush and it's green and there's flowers and fruit. He sits in a jacuzzi by day, sleeps in a hammock by night. He has everything he could ever want. What he experiences there is exactly what we want. That's why we go to Hawaii. That's why we work all year, because I want that vacation. That's why I work all week, because I want to get to the weekend. Simba has it made. He thinks being a king means I can do whatever I want. And in Hakuna Matata world, he has no worries, no responsibility. And then who shows up to see him? You mentioned her earlier. Which character?
Nala.
Nala.
What it takes a woman to make some
of course, right? So Nala shows up and they sing their song, right? Can you feel the love tonight, right? They're rolling around and the sun is setting, they're kissing, beautiful, everything's good. Then she says, hey, Simba, it's good to see you, but you got to come back with me.
We need you.
He's like, what do you mean? She's like, Scar's taking over everything. He's like, no. Hakuna Matata. I'm staying right here. She goes, no. Maybe I didn't make myself clear. If you don't come back with me, everyone is going to die and you are responsible. Then you know what he says? Hakuna Matata. I'm staying right here. And then she leaves. She leaves him. As a matter of fact, there's a moment before she leaves. She's like, I can't believe you're acting like this. He goes, whoa. You're beginning to sound like my dad. She says, at least one of us does. She leaves him. He's left alone. Rafiki comes, hits him in the head, sees his father in the clouds. Remember who you are. Simba goes back, defeats Scar, and it becomes the biggest animated movie of all time. BF, before Frozen. And it didn't become the biggest animated movie because we just love movies about lions. No, it became a world-changing story, because that movie gives all of us a taste of what true greatness really is. You want to be great in life, there's only one way. Take responsibility for the world. And if you take the word responsibility, that word, if you break it down, the essence of it is the ability to respond. Wherever I have the ability to respond, I am responsible. I don't wake up every day and go, oh, I'm an artist. What can I do to draw and make myself happy? It's no, how do I use my passions and abilities to take responsibility? So to answer your question, how do we empathize with another person? The only way to empathize, to feel what they're feeling, is first, you have to love humanity. You have to love people. And you have to realize that you being alive is a responsibility. Take that ability and respond. And the more you wake up and see that it's a responsibility to impact another person, the more you'll feel for them.
So that is incredible. So I don't even know if
Did you realize there was so much in The Lion King? What a great movie.
Well, right? I didn't know it was that, but I do know that animation and Disney and the reason why it's so successful, all of these classics, is they touch our heart.
They sure do.
Right? I didn't know that, but like Shakespeare, but I was so struck, and I just lost my train of thought what I was going to say about when you were talking about being responsible.
Responsibility, making an impact, ability to respond.
Not half as brilliant as what you said. But it's
right. That's how we empathize. You have to feel, there's a great quote. I don't know who said it, but, people ask me a lot because, I travel the world as an inspirational speaker, right? I speak in communities, and whether it's corporations or corporate, all kinds of talks that I do, in leadership, business, you name it. I talk about all parenthood, marriage, everything's in there. And people ask me a lot, well, how do you become an impactful speaker, right? How do you become an impactful speaker? And this goes for anything in life. If you want to impact another person by communicating, because you talked about communication, Patty, the quote that I heard, I don't remember who said it, just so powerful. It's more than an audience or another person will ever care how much you know.
Until they know how much you care.
They want to know how much you care.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Right. Teddy Roosevelt. There you go. Beautiful. Right. That comes from sincerity. You got to be real. The greatest Disney.
I did realize, I did remember what I was going to say. So Sigmund Freud, it could have been his daughter, but I think it was Sigmund, was constantly asked, what's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of life?
Yeah.
And he gave a very simple answer that unfortunately was misinterpreted. What he said was to work and to love. People misinterpreted the love as sex. He meant love, relationships, people. And when he said work, what he didn't mean work for a living, he meant responsibility for society. You have a responsibility to make a contribution
Right.
to the world. You have a responsibility to.
I'm gonna go a step further. Sigmund Freud said that. I think he is half correct. I think he's missing. I think he's missing the end.
He was smoking cocaine at the time. So
right.
give him a pass.
Look, I totally agree with that. I think but taking responsibility for the world is a means, but it's not the end.
Mm-hmm.
See, I think when we do serve humanity and we do all those things, that's not the end. That's a means. The end, what I achieve, is what I do think is the purpose of life. And that is only one thing: to grow as a human being, to work on myself. Because when you give to another person, the byproduct of that is you're growing as a human being. Everyone listening, if you were to make a list of all of your negative character attributes, and guess what? We all have them.
A lot.
We all have them, right? You know what life's about? Just work on those. Just take that list and make it less. And then you take that positive list of your positive attributes. Life's about making that list bigger. And the only way to do it, the means to achieving personal growth and becoming a more humble person, living a person who has more integrity, becoming a more giving, whatever it is, the only way to do it is to wake up and get out of yourself and realize that you are here to serve humanity. When you do that, by the way, you can't have a marriage if you're not in that marriage with the mindset of, I want to give to another person. I talked earlier about Judaism, that there's a Hebrew word for love in Judaism. The love is ahava.
Ahava. Yeah.
Right? And the root of that word, every Hebrew word has a root. It's 2 or 3 letters. And the root of that word tells you the essence of what the word really is. If you ask most people in the world, do you love someone? They say, yeah, I love you. I love this part. I love that. What's love? Then they'll have to think about it for a second. Wait, love? Well, maybe think about it. It could be different for you or different for me. People have to think about it. But you're so sure you love someone, but you don't have it on your fingertips what it is. This is a beautiful definition of love. Love is to give to another human being, because the Hebrew word love is ahava. The root is hav. It means to give. When you love someone, you give to them. Love is a verb. Love is not an adjective. Love is not something you feel as a result of someone else. Love is giving to another person. Mm-hmm. These are tools to help us grow as a human being.
Well, I could go on and on and on, but that is such a beautiful way to end. But I just want to ask you a question. What's the one song that you cannot live without?
I don't have to think about it because I know.
Really?
But I've never been asked that question. I love it. So I'm a big movie guy. I'm a big movie soundtrack guy.
I hadn't picked up on that.
Hadn't picked that up, right? So my favorite composer of all time is John Williams, and he wrote the music to every Spielberg movie. He wrote Jurassic Park and E.T. and Jaws, boom, 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 right? He wrote Star Wars. I mean, you name it. He wrote Schindler's List. I wrote Home Alone. He's an incredible filmmaker as a songwriter, as a score writer. But my favorite score of all time is written by Hans Zimmer. And I'm not kidding. You can ask my kids. They will tell you this is true. Every day for over 20 years, I listened to the same track, the same song every day.
Nobody wants you driving them anyway.
Oh, but you know what? I know, right? But I listen to it every day. And I could be in the most uplifted mood, like windows down, and I'm like soaring. I put this song on. I could be in the most sad down mood. It brings me comfort.
And the song is?
Do I get a drum roll? The song is called Now We Are Free. And it's from Hans Zimmer. It's from the movie Gladiator.
You have to. I love Gladiator.
Sing it. Yeah. And,
sing a little bit.
I wouldn't even do it justice, but I'm opening up my phone right now. I actually collect versions.
I love those movies when men were men.
Oh yeah. But this movie soundtrack, it's unbelievable. But the whole soundtrack, there's a track called Honor Him, Earth. Yep. But Now We Are Free. It's such a great song that many singers out there.
Soldier of Rome. Honor.
Yeah. But this theme has these chords, the music, it's unbelievable. And if anyone wants to go find an incredible version, go get the Now We Are Free track from the Gladiator soundtrack. Also, check out, there's an incredible version from a group called Celtic Thunder, or Celtic Thunder, if you want to mispronounce it.
We're Americans. We always
right. And there's also a version by an incredible woman, Leona Lewis does a version also. It's just so beautiful, but I collect versions of the song Now We Are Free. So check it out. And I just have to urge everybody, if you're listening to this episode, always remember that each one of us is absolutely unique. And there's no two people.
Why is that your all-time favorite song? Why?
Because it just motivates me, comforts me. One of my kids, sorry.
I was going to say that sounded like a bicycle bell.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, but no,
good humor, man.
It just motivates me to just keep going. Life is hard. Everyone listening knows it. Life is hard. Relationships are hard and work is hard. And at any minute we could lose everything we have. We could lose everything we have. We could lose our money, our jobs, someone we love, even our values get tested. Life is difficult. And when you find people in life that can uplift you, or music that uplifts you, things that can remind you to, as they say in Finding Nemo, just keep swimming, just keep going. And remember that because each one of us is unique, that we must have a unique purpose. No two people in the world have the same purpose. So how much time do we spend every day focused on what other people are doing, as opposed to being inspired by them and going, now, what can I do? How do I live a meaningful life, a life of awesome? Is being unique, which I am, and realizing that I have to contribute that to the world. The world doesn't need another Steven Spielberg. It doesn't need another Dr. Patty Ann, right? We have to find people out there to find their unique gifts and give that to the world.
And Life of Awesome is the name of your podcast.
Life of Awesome. Yeah,
check it out. So how can people find out more about you?
Please. Yeah, I'm. You can go to my website. It's Saul, Saul Blinkoff, like blink your eyes off.com. And from there, you will have access to Instagram. I'm on Instagram, my podcast. You can see some of my speaking that I do. There's a promo video there. And if you're interested in bringing me as a speaker to your community, to your business, that's something that I just really, really love. And I love those opportunities to make my small dent in the world.
Oh my gosh. So I really, truly could have spoken to you all day. So
right back at you. You're incredibly, you're brilliant and sensitive. And I just love learning from you. And I appreciate this, like you said, collaboration. What was the word? Was it collaboration? No.
You said you worked for me. I said, we're collaborating.
We're collaborating. I love this conversation. I really appreciate you spending time with me and inviting me to be with you and your audience. So thank you so much.